Hello everyone and welcome to the 18th Verzió International Human Rights Documentary Film Festival. I'm Borbála Csukás and today my guest is Hajnal Molnár-Szakács. Hello Hajnal, could you please introduce yourself shortly?
Of course. Hi Borbála, it's such a pleasure to be here today. I am Hajnal Molnár-Szakács. I am the Director of Institute Granting at the Sundance Institute. I was previously the director of our Documentary Film Fund for a number of years and have worked at the Institute for over 11 years now. So always kind of in the nonfiction space, working with artists in our funding. I don't know if you want to know, but I'm originally from Transylvania. I was born in Szeptyszentgyörgy and I grew up in Canada. And I've been in LA. I live right now in LA and I've been here for about 15 years.
Okay. And could you explain a little bit about this new position that you have?
Sure. So just a couple months ago, I think over the summer, we formalized a new granting department called Institute Granting. And I'm overseeing this new department. The objectives of this new program are really to kind of create strategy that goes across our programs. As I will share in my presentation, you'll learn that Sundance has a number of different programs: fiction, nonfiction, theater, music. So we want to create a comprehensive strategy that looks across our programs and offers opportunities for artists and really centering them in how we're kind of disseminating the grants, looking at equity, and working really with transparency as well. And then this department's also kind of working to be engaged in conversations with the field to learn what types of funding are needed. And we're hoping to be able to pilot new forms of funding through the department. So as an example, we just launched this is only US-based funding, but it's a Humanities Sustainability Fellowship. So this program is really thinking of what would happen if we can give an artist a minimum living wage for a year. So we're giving 20 media makers $5,000 a month with no kind of strings attached in terms of how they use the funding. They can use it for rent, they can use it for their projects. And they do have to work on a project in that year. But so we're piloting that. What happens when you give an artist money in that way?
You have this in Hungary. Sounds amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, I wish we had this.
Oh, yeah. I know.
And can I ask, how did you end up working for Sundance? Like, where does this love for documentaries come from?
Sure. So I actually, my academic kind of background is I studied international business in German. And then I went to grad school in Milan. I went to SDA Bocconi and I studied nonprofit management. And I was really interested in human rights and development. And, after I finished grad school, I worked in Europe for a little bit. I came back to North America. And, I was in my 20s. I was like, what can I do? How can I save the world? And, nonfiction films really inspired me. And I was watching, it was the time of Children Underground. And there was kind of this resurgence and vibrancy in the nonfiction space at the time. And I applied for an internship at Sundance. And because the Sundance Documentary Fund originally was really a social justice human rights fund, I was lucky enough to get the position. And that's where my love for nonfiction, that's where my love for artists and just the power that nonfiction has for social change, for cultural change, really kind of started and blossomed.
Okay, nice to know. Well, you already mentioned, I wanted to ask you about your connection to Hungary, but you already mentioned that. So I guess we can start the presentation if you feel like.
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen, but feel free to interrupt me at any time as I'm talking.
Okay.
So Sundance Institute, this is an image from Utah where Robert Redford founded the Institute. So just as a little bit of a background, Robert Redford founded Sundance in 1981. He wanted to create a safe space where artists could create without the pressures of Hollywood. He brought together 10 independent filmmakers, and he brought them to a piece of land he had bought in Utah, which became known as the Sundance Resort. And he also brought directors and actors, and they workshopped their projects. And this was where the first Sundance Lab was born. And today our mission hasn't changed that much. Sundance Institute, we're a nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to discovery and development of independent artists and audiences. Through our programs, the Institute seeks to discover, support, and inspire independent film, media, and theater artists from the United States and around the world, and introduce audiences to their new work. So this is really a summary of what we do today. And if I go to the next, oops, too far. If this is the next slide, you can see all our different programs. So today, we're an organization with offices in Los Angeles, New York, and Park City, although we also have a lot of staff since COVID who are working remotely. We have, I think, about 180 full-time staff, and we provide through our programs about 25 residential labs, nearly $4 million in non-recoupable granting across our programs. We do ongoing mentorships, and we support more than 900 artists each year. Our most known program is probably Sundance Film Festival, which does happen every year in Utah and Park City. We are currently deep in the planning of this year's festival, which is probably going to be, we're looking at a hybrid festival. So there's going to be in-person activations and in-person films and panels, but then also really taking what we learned last year when we went fully online and offering opportunities to connect online and watch films online and watch panels and interact with people spread around the world. Some of the other programs we offer, the documentary film program, which is where I had my start, and I was within the documentary film program for 10, 11 years. Our feature film program, which is really kind of the first program in a way, the episodic program. They work on fiction only. Our interdisciplinary program is our program that works in music, theater, and emerging media. Our creative producing program, our Indigenous program, outreach and inclusion, really looking at equity across the industry, includes our Ignite program, which is for young creators. So I think it's between the ages of 18 and 24, and then Women at Sundance. As you probably know, women are really, they're not represented in equal numbers in the film industry. So Sundance has been working for many years to create opportunities for women. We offer workshops and tours. Our CoLab, actually, if you're not familiar with CoLab, is our online learning platform. And it's a really great resource. There's 3 levels. There's a free version. There's that has a lot of really great master classes and sessions where you can ask questions. And then there's also a we offer full courses that are over weeks. It's a really great resource that's open to artists from around the world. So I would highly, highly recommend that you sign up. Sundance Film Festival, which you talked about, and Institute granting is where I'm currently sitting. So the documentary film program, you know, it was established in 2002, and it was with founding support from Open Society Foundation. And because of that, as I mentioned earlier, it was really a human rights and social justice focused program, looking at how film can be a lever or a tool for social change, cultural change, political, moving policies, things like that. Today, the program is really a vibrant kind of global resource for nonfiction storytelling across kind of genres, across themes and topics. We're no longer looking at only human rights and social justice themes, but it's very kind of open and broad. You know, we really think about the documentary film program, or we like to refer to as the DFP, where we champion a diverse global array of voices, creating beautiful, complex, and challenging nonfiction work. We offer grants, creative labs, and year-round support. And, you know, we aim to be a resource for independent nonfiction filmmaking. So if we look at the program itself, you know, we are broken down into a number of different opportunities. There is, we have our labs and fellowships, and then our alumni support. Our most well-known lab is the Doc Edit and Story Lab, I would say. Because of COVID, we did put a pause on that lab last year. We are planning on bringing it back this year. We also have our producing fellowship, which is ongoing, and we just brought on a new cohort. Unfortunately, these are, I believe, only US-based opportunities at this point. And then we have our alumni support. And then we have the Sundance Documentary Fund, which I'll go into more detail, the Short Film Fund, which is normally an annual kind of call that's specifically focused on a specific topic or certain voices. And then we also have our specialty funds. We have Illuminate, Condata, and Sandbox Fund. And these are funds that are issue-driven by the funder's mission. So they really align with what the funder is interested in supporting. So the Sundance Institute Documentary Fund is a global fund that supports nonfiction storytelling with a distinctive voice and vision by both emerging and established documentary filmmakers who have a meaningful connection to the work they create. So this is, you know, as I just read the slide, it really kind of sums up what we do. We are a global fund. We fund projects from around the world. But really looking at those projects that offer that unique voice, that are doing something new, that are bringing forth new perspectives. Excuse me. Eligibility for the Doc Fund. So the Documentary Fund supports nonfiction projects at all stages of production. So meaning from development through post-production. We only support feature-length films through the Documentary Fund. So I know there's often conversation like what's a feature-length film? We tend to go with 52 minutes or longer. Our grants are not huge. We like to think of them as catalytic. You know, thinking of them as, you know, once you receive a grant from Sundance, you can hopefully leverage that to receive funds from other sources. We have our development fund, which is up to $25,000. Visual samples are encouraged but not required. We have our production fund, which is up to $50,000. We require a visual sample of at least 10 minutes. And then our post-production fund, which is up to $50,000, visual samples of at least 20 minutes.
Can I ask, so if you support a project for development, for example, if they apply again for production funds, do you support one project in each stage if if the project is good enough, or one project can get just one of these three supports?
So currently, if you receive a grant in development, you're not eligible to apply to the documentary fund again. But I don't want that to discourage people from applying in development, because even though the grant sizes are smaller, you're with the program for a longer period of time, right? So you can take advantage of the other resources that we're able to offer. Because once you receive a grant from us, you're part of the Sundance community, you're part of the Sundance family in a way. And we offer because of COVID, we've transitioned a lot of what we're offering online. So, artists who are not based in the US are also able to take advantage of special seminars that we're putting on. We're bringing in experts to talk about editing, or we're bringing in experts to talk about music and composing and sound design. We also, our relationships with the artists that we support are really driven by the artists that we are supporting. So we invite the artists to come to us and let us know like what they're having issues with, what they need support with. Because when they do that, then we're able to help troubleshoot them. Since 2002, we've supported, I don't even know, thousands of projects, which means, thousands of artists. And this is our network. And we often say, making a nonfiction film is a really lonely endeavor. You feel like you're the only one that is going through this. Nobody's ever experienced what you're experiencing. Nobody's ever tried to do what you're doing. And it might be true, but there might be somebody out there in our network who has some semblance of what you're going through, who we could potentially connect you with to be a resource. And then also we act as resources as well. We will watch cuts for our grantees, we'll provide feedback. We've also set up special workshops for our grantees. So all that to say, I know your question was, can you apply? You can't, but there's other opportunities and other doors that open for you once you receive a grant. And we're also, we're also trying to offer specific granting opportunities that are only for our grantees, right? So then you're not competing against 2,000 applications, you're only competing against 20.
Okay. And if you don't get supported, do you have any rules, like how many times you can apply for development funds? If, I don't know, if a project stays in development for 3 years, like, is there a rule that you can't apply with the same film or no?
No, we don't have any rules like that. I would say, our only rule is that you have to show a significant development in your project. So when you submit the material to us the first time and we say no, the next time you submit, the material that you send, don't send us the same thing. Like, it has to have developed. Your thinking around, has to have developed. Your relationship with your characters or the subject matter has to have deepened. And we have to be able to see that either in the written material or in the visual material as well. But otherwise, you can apply as many times as you want. And, we have had some applications that they applied 3-4 times and they received the grant on the 5th time,
Oh, good to know.
So, it does happen.
Okay.
Should I go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
So last October, I believe it was, I wrote a blog kind of outlining what our international priorities are and what our US priorities are. So within our international priorities, we mapped out certain regions of the world that we wanted to focus our funding upon. And these regions were Africa, Latin America, Middle East, China, India, and then indigenous communities globally. The reason behind kind of identifying these geographic regions was that One, in certain areas like Latin America, we've been doing a lot of work, a lot of cultivation. We've been forming a lot of partnerships. Same with the Middle East. And we wanted to ensure that, especially as like COVID was hitting, these regions were still able to maintain, their cultural economies. Similarly, we were looking at regions in the world that may have had, some government funding that was going towards their cultural sector and for media and film. And with COVID, that funding was pulled back. So really looking to kind of boost that up as much as we could. Our fund is not that large, but as much as we could, we wanted to ensure that there's some continuation of the vibrancy that was starting to happen in these regions. And within the US, we're looking at, communities that have been underrepresented in film and media and in nonfiction. So looking at Black, Indigenous, and people of color artists who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, artists from the LGBTQ plus community, artists from the disability community. So really looking at supporting these underrepresented voices.
And so is this list something that is always changing, or how do you decide on like to add another continent or take out a continent, or how does this work in practice?
Yeah, so I think, this list is a priority list, right? So this is where the majority of the projects that we're funding from live, but it's not exclusive. And it is constantly changing because things are constantly happening. We're not in a static environment. So we're also looking at, what are the countries where freedom of speech is threatened? What are the countries that, democratic principles are being kind of taken away, or rights are being taken away and stripped from, where are filmmakers threatened, and looking to support filmmakers in those communities as well.
Okay, and then, for example, how should we imagine this? So you take the applications that come from these regions first, and you choose from them, or I don't know, you have a Spanish and an Argentinian project that you have to decide on, and you choose the Argentinian, or how does this work?
Yeah, it does. Like, all things being, it's really hard to compare one project to another project, right? But if we're looking at a project that is from Argentina and one from Spain, and let's say like it's the same project, exactly the same project. The only thing is the funding situation. So we would look at the funding situation, right? And say, okay, what kind of access does this film and filmmaker have to funding? And then we would probably support the project that has less access to funding.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have limited funds. So, unfortunately, there's so many incredible projects and we just can't support them all. Yeah, it's an impossible task. So let me keep going. So in terms of application components, this is the really looking at kind of what the key components of the application are. For many years, I don't know if you're familiar with the Documentary Core app. So this was something that we piloted with the IDA, I think about 5 years ago. And it was meant to help filmmakers with the burden of having to write applications, because we were finding that every single funder was asking almost the same question, but just in a different way. So we wanted to create like one application that every single funder could use. So a number of funders adopted this, and it was great. But then over the years, the field changed. And actually, you know, last fall, we went rogue. So we added questions, we updated questions. So we, even as we were one of the founders, we left the core app and did kind of our own thing, because we really wanted our questions to reflect where the field was going. I think one of the good things is, like, right now, we have a number of funders that have come together, and over this past year, we're once again working on updating that documentary core app to reflect the changes in the field, and then hopefully bring on more adopters, so that once again, filmmakers can apply to Sundance, they can apply to Catapult, they can apply to Chicken and Egg, they can apply to Doc Society with that one application. But all that to say, these are kind of the elements of our application right now. We have our the story synopsis. You know, this is really looking at, you know, what is your story about? I'm just gonna pull this up so I make sure I'm telling you correct things. So what is the story about? Who are you? Who are your characters? You know, what are the potential plot points? If you have story structure, narrative trajectory, this is, you know, we're not necessarily saying that you have to have a 3-act structure. But if you do, explain that to us. And if you don't, explain that to us as well. Topic summary, you know, explain kind of the world, the context that the film fits in. What's the cultural, historical, political context for the film? This is where you would detail the topics, the themes, the issues, stakes, challenges, things like that. Artistic approach. You know, this is, what is your creative vision for the film? How are you going to bring the film to life? What are the visual, what are the audio elements that you're going to employ to bring this film to life? And then this is also where, you know, filmmaking is a creative endeavor. So explain to us your creative process. We want to know you as an artist. If there's any kind of cinematic language or any particular artistic approach that you're employing, tell us about that. Connection to the story. This is something that's fairly new. You know, it's been a lot of conversations in the doc field about this connection to the story piece. You know, a lot of people there's been the movement around nothing about us without us. But this is really where we want you to reflect on your team's connection to the story that you're telling. How are you collaborating with the protagonist? And how's the film team engaging with the community that you're making the film with? Is there a creative team's personal connection to the story or to the place it takes place? You know, discuss your access. Discuss your access to the characters. Discuss your access to the story. The director's statement, this is one of the ones that I'm really excited about, because I think this is where the director has the chance to let us know who they are as an artist. This is really about, we want to hear from the director about who they are as a filmmaker. How is this film evolving or developing or expanding your creative practice? You know, Sundance is a artist support organization. We are really championing independent voices. So the artist is always at the core of what we do. So this is really, really important for us, because we want to ensure that we understand where you're coming from. What are the challenges that you're facing? Financial overview, I think that totally makes sense. How much money do you have? Where are you going to go get it from? How much more do you need? And then visual materials. So we do ask, you know, I mentioned it earlier, we do ask for visual samples. and they're just really, we receive, I'd say 1,100 applications per round and are able to fund 20 projects. So it's extremely competitive. Visual materials will really set your project apart.
Sorry,
Oh.
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So I guess, the biggest question of everyone is like, okay, you receive so many applications, and I guess it's really difficult to answer to this question, but maybe you can. That what makes for you a story, stand out? What makes it different from the others?
Yeah, of course. And I think this is perfect for this slide, actually. When we are looking at projects, these are kind of broad buckets of what we are thinking about, right? Engaging storytelling, artistic vision, thoughtful approach, contemporary cultural relevance, potential to connect with an intended audience. When we are reviewing a proposal, we tend to ask ourselves, what does the filmmaking tell us about the direction, the perspective, and the style of this project? Or what does the proposal tell us about the intended direction, perspective, or style? When we are reading or watching the material, and if it's a character or story-driven film, we like to think about, what are the characters interesting? Are they people that we want to spend time with? Are they, how developed is the intimacy with the characters? And we're also looking at, is the filmmaker's point of view present? Do we know what is their like kind of unique stamp on this project, right? Like, and then also like what challenges may come up. Are they aware of these challenges? We're looking to support projects that are really interrogating new topics or interrogating in existing conversations, and deepening the conversations that we're already having. So are they doing that? Like, is it just a superficial kind of overview of something, or is it really asking questions that are opening up new ways of thinking? I think there's also, we also think about the cinematic language. What is the cinematic language they're employing? Why is that being used? And is it a fit? Are they, if they're using animation, for instance, does it make sense for the project to have animation? Or reenactments, or if they're doing talking head interviews, does that make sense? Like, does that fit with the story they're trying to tell? So I think those are kind of some of the questions that we're asking, and the answers to those questions usually sets projects apart.
And is the written or the visual material more important? Like, for example, have you had any project that maybe the written part wasn't really good, but then you saw what they submitted as visual material and it was so amazing that that you ended up supporting it?
Yes, so that does happen quite a bit. Over half of the applications we receive are, I would say, from English as second language speakers, or so it's really often much more difficult to express something that's so intimate to you in a language that's not your own. And we have it in our US-based applications as well, because you're a filmmaker, you're not a writer per se necessarily. So we do see that quite a bit. And oftentimes what we do is we'll go back to the filmmaker with specific questions to expand on, what did you mean by this, or how are you planning on expressing that? You know, can you walk us through your narrative, think your narrative again? We will go to the filmmaker to help us understand that. You know, if there's like a complete disconnect between the proposal and the project, that's usually a red flag. Usually it's more like the proposal is really thin. It's not as well developed, and that's when we'll go in and ask.
Okay. And last question, do you have any like advice for people who will apply in the future? Like, is there any mistake, or I don't know if I can call it mistake, but anything that you have seen in visual or written material that it's like really common and you would wish that people would know about?
Yeah, I think, you know, some of the things that people often kind of conflate are topic summary and story summary. So they'll tell us about, in the story summary, they'll tell us about the topic rather than just focusing on the story. So one of the most useful things that actually my former boss said to me once was, when you're writing your story summary, what you should, and you're having difficulties kind of laying that out, think about how you would tell that story to an 8-year-old child. Because when you do that, you will really hone in on the key plot points. And then once you have that, you fill out the rest, right? So then that allows your story summary to be focused on your story and your characters, rather than going into the political context or the social context, and kind of, and that should really stay in your topic summary. That's one thing. I think another thing that filmmakers will often do is, when they're sending us their sample, they'll send a trailer or a teaser. And as a reviewer, that's often really unsatisfying, because what we want, especially if you're in production or post-production, is that we want to get to know your characters. We want to get to know the themes that you're tangling with, right? So the best way to do that is to allow us time to sit with a character in a scene. Let us see how you are able to, what's your scene work like, right? How is the character's voice coming across? Rather than like cutting together a trailer for us, which is often does not give us a sense of the tone. It does not give us a sense of the style. It's often flashy. It's like fast cut. We want to know, like, we want to understand the film itself. I think that's one. Yeah, I think, and then in terms of, I was just gonna say, you know, visual sample versus the proposal, which one's more important? I actually don't like kind of setting it up like that, because it depends a lot also on the stage of the project. If something's in development, oftentimes the written sample is much more, like, we'll consider it much more. If you're in post-production, you probably have a much longer cut. A lot of the things have already kind of unfolded. So then we'll be looking more at the film itself, right? The visual sample. So it really depends where you are in that process.
And for example, if you apply for post-production fund, like in which stage you would recommend applying? Like when you already have, like, you know, which stage of the rough cut? Like at the very beginning, when you can, you know, the dramaturgical line is not maybe that good, or
right.
Like, you recommend when it's like an almost finished film and you need money for production?
I would say not an almost finished film. There's two reasons, right? So currently the documentary fund only has one call a year. So in a certain way, like, you have to apply whenever the application's open.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes, if you're in post, by the time the next application comes around, you're done. And then the other reason is that the process takes a long time. So it takes about 6 months from the point you apply to the point you get your decision. And your project, we can't fund finished films. So if you complete your project during those 6 months, we can't support you. Okay. So the project would have to premiere after we make our decisions. Okay. And then, the other thing is too, like if you apply once you're almost done, then you can't take advantage of the resources that Sundance can offer. Right? So yeah. Okay. I can just share, these are some examples of projects we've supported recently.
Let's go back to the project criteria, no? Or we already talked about everything on that slide?
We did. We talked about everything.
Okay. Then I have one more question.
Oh, sure.
So can you explain how is the selection process? Like how many people read the projects? Do you discuss in a team every project that is submitted, or like what's the process of it?
So, so the process is actually pretty complex and pretty kind of multi-armed, I'd say. So as I mentioned, we receive about, let's say, 1,100 applications per round. And the team is really small. On the fund team, it's a core team of 4 people. We're hiring a new manager. So once that person's in place, it's going to be 4 people. And then the documentary film program is in total 10 people, I think. So it's a small team. But essentially the process is all those 1,100 applications are initially reviewed by external screeners. So these are individuals who are based around the world, who we've trained, some have worked for us in the past, who take the initial pass and watch a subset of the 1,100 projects. They provide written reviews for us. And then we have a staff person who goes through and reviews every single one of the reviews. She will, have conversations with the reviewers to talk through the project. And then the projects that, receive a higher rating, they are bumped up to the next level, right? So in that initial process, there's kind of a natural falling off of, I'd say, 40% of the project. So, the next 600 are then, some are reviewed by, we have kind of the second layer screeners who have deeper knowledge in certain areas, expertise in certain areas, and staff. So that's when staff starts to review. And then projects in this way keep getting bumped up. And then we get to a point where we have, a short list of 30 to 40 projects, and we convene an external panel. So this panel comes together and it's made out of directors, editors, producers. Oftentimes it's also somebody who's kind of in the festival or exhibition space. And then there's always a representative from Open Society Foundations on the panel, and they come together, we spend a day, 2 days discussing all the projects, and they make recommendations on which projects to fund. So that's the process of how funding happens. Unfortunately, because of the bulk of the number of applications we get, we can't provide individual feedback to all 1,100. But we do provide feedback to all our finalists. So that's the process.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah. It sounds like a really long process, but it's clear.
And that's why it takes us 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, because there's so many eyes on it. And we bring in experts to tell us about it, and we have kind of regional screeners to tell us the significance of a certain film because for a certain region. So yeah, but it's a really rewarding process, I will say. We get to learn a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then just some examples I can share of this is the slide up now, is the projects that we supported in the past. Crip Camp. This is an Oscar-nominated project from Nicole Noonan and Jim Lebrecht, and it follows some disability rights movement through a group of campers. It's a really incredible film. Landfall by Cecilia Alderando. These are, everyday life in post-hurricane Puerto Rico. Again, really, really beautiful. It's kind of examining this ruined world as it's about to transform. And then we have Softy from Sam Soko. And this is an incredible, you see the character there and his wife. Softy is a political activist and he runs for office in a regional Kenyan election. And then you kind of get to know, it's like a personal story. It's a political drama. Highly recommend that you watch it. And I don't know, let me just make sure. I can share more about our specialty funds if it's useful. So I mentioned them earlier. These don't really have the same type of like priority region specifications. They're more issue specific. So our Sandbox Fund supports artists working at the intersection of science and nonfiction storytelling and feature documentaries. Granting decisions are made 3 times a year, typically in the spring, summer, and fall. I wish I would have pulled this up, and I'm so sorry because I'm forgetting on the title, but we just, in our most recent round, I think this is public, but we supported a filmmaker from Hungary through this specific Sandbox opportunity.
Oh.
And then the Kendata Fund supports nonfiction storytelling. This is 2 issues. One is US only, the other one is US and international. So it's nonfiction addressing environmental sustainability, which is both US and international. They also have a gun violence initiative, but that's US only. Is it okay if I look up our...
What?
I just wanted to be able to tell you the name of the film that we just supported.
Sure.
If I can find it. Okay, I might have to send it to you later.
Okay.
And then Illuminate Fund, unfortunately, they work in specific regions of the world, and Hungary is not one of their regions. But the areas of interest for them are civic empowerment, data and digital rights, independent media, and financial transparency. And that is my presentation. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Okay. Well, I think I have asked all the questions that I had. I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add.
I think I've talked your ear off. I'm happy if anybody has any questions. Feel free to share my email address. I should have created a slide. Apologies that had it, but I forgot. But yeah, feel free to share my email address. I'm happy to answer any questions, and hopefully I get to see you guys in person next year.
Yes, for sure. We'll do this again next year for the person.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for everything, sharing all the information. Have a nice day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.